LiberalViewer presents.
So earlier this month in a video segment you can see in full at tinyurl.com/MegynMajority, Jon Stewart and The Daily Show totally decimated the credibility of Fox News in general and Fox News anchor Megyn Kelly specifically because of the way that supposed straight news anchors on Fox News like Megyn Kelly keep aggressively opposing healthcare reform under the guise of speaking for the majority of the American people, as you can see, for example, in this clip.
Help me understand why, when you look at the latest polls and you have 77% or 73% of the American people saying scrap this bill, why the Democrats don't come out and say, you know what, we hear you, we're going to scrap it.
Yes, I simply would like to know, as an honest and balanced news person, when you're going to pull your Stalinist head out of your Leninist ass and listen to real Americans, because we're a news show and we couldn't find one person that doesn't think this bill should be scrapped.
But beyond that colorful sarcasm, the most amazing thing about this Daily Show segment was the way the comedy program used real facts and especially real numbers to mock the content of the supposed news program, as you can see, for example, in this clip.
There's still one thing that's irrefutable, and that is the numbers.
70% of the American people wanted Congress to ditch this bill.
Numbers don't lie. Now, sure, with polling, you can always come in with caveats like, well, it depends on how the question is asked, or you can point to other polls showing that Americans do want a health care reform bill and that a majority favor the public option and a plurality support this bill's actual provisions once the provisions are explained to them.
And after refuting the validity of Megyn Kelly's poll numbers, Jon Stewart then reminded Megyn Kelly of the attitude she had previously expressed about polls she didn't find as useful, as you can see here.
But Megyn Kelly knows you can't parse poll numbers. They're infallible. Even if, like in October 2008, those numbers might have suggested that Barack Obama was going to win the presidential election.
You know, you've got to look at these poll numbers because Barack Obama tends to poll better than he performs. The bottom line is you don't trust the polls.
Yeah.
With all due respect to our pollsters, they might not tell us anything.
Or they might tell you everything, depending on your opinion of what the news should be.
So both by using Megyn Kelly's own words captured on video and by using numbers from actual polls, Jon Stewart and his writers completely punctured Megyn Kelly's penchant for pretending to speak for most Americans on healthcare reform. So after having her penchant punctured like that, you'd think that Miss Kelly would back off a bit, but such journalistic restraint was still not evident this week when Megyn Kelly argued the poll numbers on healthcare again, this time with former Bill Clinton pollster Bernard Whitman, as you can see in this clip.
What the polls show very clearly is the American people are evenly divided on this piece of legislation. And
really?
I believe,
what polls?
and it's very clear.
What polls are you referring to, Bernard?
Look at all the polls. All the polls show an even split between people that are in favor of the bill versus people who are against.
No,
if you
Bernard,
look at some of the fundamental...
let me just stop you because that's not true.
Now, up to this point, Megyn Kelly's advocacy, while still not fair and balanced, could be accurate because the Democratic pollster she's arguing with did say that all the polls show Americans are divided on this issue, while a few polls do have a majority of Americans opposing the legislation, even if those same polls find they like what's in the legislation. But the Real Clear Politics average still shows that less than 49% opposed the legislation, which is less than a majority, and some polls, like the recent Gallup poll, show Americans divided within the margin of error, all of which contradict Megyn Kelly's next points that you can see here.
Trust me, we've been following the polling carefully. I handled exit polling for Fox during the elections. I follow the polls. The latest Rasmussen Reports poll shows that the people are against the bill. And the RealClearPolitics.com average of all the polls shows that, now you can get into the piecemeal thing. I'm with you on that. But when it comes to the overall bill, still the majority is against it.
It's not a majority. It's maybe 49-44. That's within the margin of error.
Cite the poll to me, and then we'll go from there. I just want to know what you're referring to because I'm not familiar with that poll.
Well, if Megyn Kelly is not familiar with that poll, then she shouldn't be claiming to be following the poll so closely, given that the Gallup poll is within the margin of error, and even the Real Clear Politics average shows that less than a majority are against the legislation. But maybe Megyn Kelly's problem is that she's following the polls but not really seeing them, as supported by her poll reading in an unrelated segment later in that same program that you can see here.
Well, a new poll shows that many people think that the American dream is now out of reach. Check this out. The question is, do you think it is easier or harder to reach the American dream today than it was for your parents' generation before? 60% say it's harder. 33% say it's easier, and 6% say it's about the same.
Now, actually, the mistake there was in the graphic, which showed how many people think the American dream will be harder to reach for their children, while Megyn Kelly was reading how many people think the American dream is harder to reach for them than it was for their parents, and that error was pretty harmless, but the way Fox News has been erroneously using polls in the healthcare debate may be much less harmless and is particularly disturbing coming from someone who is previously on the record saying,
The bottom line is you don't trust the polls.
Yeah.
With all due respect to our pollsters, they might not tell us anything.
So I guess I made clear in this video what I think, but I want to know what you think. Should the supposed straight news anchors over on Fox News continue to use poll numbers to claim to speak for the majority of Americans on healthcare when those poll numbers are as equivocal as the ones you saw in this video? And on an issue that came up briefly in this video, to which you saw even Megyn Kelly admit, why do you think the poll numbers for the Democrats' healthcare legislation in general are significantly lower than the poll numbers for the component parts of the Democrats' healthcare legislation?
YouTube, you decide.